Hi, I'm Stephen West, no relation whatsoever to Fred West, the notorious serial killer who was fond of incest, rape, probably eating people, and his wife Rosemary. Lovely people though. So we're going to be looking at stuff I've stroked, watched, listened to, maybe even read, like a book, over the last few weeks, and hopefully this will be a regular thing. You can leave comments if you're interested, if you disagree with something, or if you've also bought the same shiny thing as me, which would be amazing. So yeah, we're going to have a perusal of what's out there. It's an amazing time for releases. Blu-rays are coming out, big companies and small companies alike. We've got people like 88 Films. We're going to be looking at some of their stuff today. Arrow Films, as ever, kind of leading the market with beautiful shit that's coming out of, you know, our favourite movies of yesteryear, and even some of our less favourites that suddenly look amazingly attractive in new shiny formats. So it's a great time to collect this stuff. This little show we're doing here is not going to be one of those boring internet things of saying, well, I think the compression rate and the reds and blues on this release by Arrow are appalling compared to my 1806 Laserdisc release. It's not going to be looking at things like anamorphic widescreen. What the fuck is anamorphic widescreen anyway? We're not interested in the pernickety stuff. All the things I'm looking at I haven't left sealed, you know, I've unwrapped stuff so I can actually, you know, watch the movies themselves and enjoy the movies. So it's not going to be anal, although we will be including, of course, scenes of anal intercourse as the video goes on. Something I'm really fond of is the 88 releases, 88 Films in the UK. Their Italian collection is something that I've been specifically collecting, and I've recently obtained a bunch of them, so just to kind of peruse through them. 2019, after the fall of New York. Wow, incredible. So they're up to, I think, about 28 in this series, maybe 30 is almost there with the Italian collection. I think maybe 30 is actually coming up soon. So we're way deep, balls deep, in the Italian collection releases. 2019 is a movie like a lot of these things that I remember from the VHS days. I think I had some kind of big box edition. It's really fun. It's one of the many early 80s post-apocalyptic things that were coming out of Italy. They were typically riffing on Mad Max, the Escape from New York, you know, that kind of thing from America. So as always, the Italians were cashing in on American hits, but as always, the Italians were doing things in a really cool and interesting way. 2019 is one of the best ones. It's got Michael Sopkiff, you know him, as the hero, and it's got the wonderful George Eastman as a character called Big Ape. George Eastman's role in this is really just a slightly hairier version of his usual screen persona. So it's basically George Eastman with extra hair. The movie itself is, as you can imagine from Italy even, it's wackier, it's gorier than the American stuff that was out there at the time. So there's a close-up eye gouging, that kind of stuff, and it's really fun. The next one I picked up recently is Enigma, or At Enigma, which is slightly awkward to say. This gets a lot of stick. It's one of Lucio Fulci's later releases. I think it's 87 it came out. And admittedly his later films are a bit shit. But through not necessarily much fault of himself, I think he was clearly a guy in not great health. And also the Italian film industry was going down the tubes. So he had far less money and I guess decent technicians to lavish on his later films that he did when he was making things like The Beyond and the House by the Cemetery, etc. So they're lesser movies. Enigma is one of them. It's, what can I say, it's very dated, so there's a real sign of the Italian film industry and horror in general in the late 80s, I think. Not really sure where they were going. So this is kind of a Carrie rip-off 10 years too late. More specifically, I think it's a Patrick rip-off, but no one really remembers Patrick because it's really boring. Although it was a hit, so they picked up on that. And it's a classic tale of a ugly duckling girl that's bullied, and she goes in a coma because of the bullying, and she gets her revenge from beyond the coma. And although it's a Fulci film, like a lot of his later stuff, it's not very gory, but it is well remembered for the scene in which a bunch of snails very slowly suffocate someone to death. It's pretty much as you'd imagine it, really. And it does start with a shot of the snails on a poster of Stallone in Rocky IV, I think it was. So they've got good taste in posters. Stallone. So Enigma, not a great movie, but it's fun. It's fun in a very sort of cheesy 80s way. It has a very corny theme song, which I would hum for you now, but you're not paying me enough. Next movie I recently watched in the Italian collection, a muck, beautiful edition by 88 Films of this 1972 giallo type movie. Not really a conventional giallo. It's a very low body count. Lots of sex, lots of nudity. Barbara Boucher. I was going to say Barbara Bach, that would be the wrong one. Farley Granger. It's got a great cast. It looks stunning. It's set in Venice, and it's a murder mystery, really. It's a who did it. There's no black gloves. I don't even think there was JNB, which is weird. But it is a fun, very stylish movie with that great Italian look of the 70s movies. It's a movie I really enjoyed. I'd never seen it before, so it was cool to watch it again. Other stuff from their collection recently I picked up Absurd, which, like the Fulci release of Enigma, has a feature-length documentary about the director. So 88 are this small label that are just cramming these releases out there at a speed of knots, several releases a month it seems, and they're also finding time to reward fans with new extras. I always like the cover design. There's another one there of Alien 2, which is a really fun Alien ripoff, in case you didn't guess, of I think 1980, which has an interview with Eli Roth. So there's a bunch of cool stuff on these releases, great presentation. Who doesn't like the spines with the numbers on, so you can keep track of what numbers you're missing? I should just say that ones I haven't yet seen, I also bought The Cynic, the Rat and the Fist, which is, I think, the movie in which John Saxon gets fisted by a rat, I'm not sure, and a movie called Mad Dog Killer, which I've never seen. I always get it confused with a movie called Mad Dog Morgan, which has nothing to do with it whatsoever, and I actually wish I hadn't have just mentioned it. So the Italian collection from 88 Films, they've got some great stuff coming up. I think Perfume of the Lady in Black is coming out soon. Delirium, Body Puzzle. So I say, a label well worth watching out for. A few more sort of odds and ends I've picked up over recent times. Recent release of Wes Craven's Shocker, which is the 1989 movie. Really great release. I think it's got all the extras from the Shout Factory release that came out in America, or Scream Factory. But it has to be said, it's a pretty shite movie. And I've just dropped it. It's a pretty poor movie. It's one of those kind of desperate attempts in the late 80s to create a new monster or serial killer like Freddy Krueger with the wisecracks. It's got an absolute terrible script by Wes Craven. It's also got some of the worst acting I can remember from sort of a fairly decent budgeted movie of that period. So Shocker, although I remember it quite fondly for Horace Pinker, the TV repairman gone bad, rewatching it, although it looks beautiful on Blu-ray, I have to say I thought it was a bit of an ordeal to watch. It's kind of a good example, I think, of this Wes Craven, who I love. He's made some great movies, but I think the interesting thing about Wes Craven in particular is a lot of movies in his career are, when you rewatch them, are kind of painful to watch. In that kind of way that those terrible scenes with the cops in Last House on the Left are painful to watch. This is like the chicken scenes, but the whole movie. So Shocker, it doesn't have any chickens, but it is a bad movie. But it was still nice to see it on HD. I bought a beautiful edition of Suspiria from, I think it's a German label called 84, so I'll just get it out for you. This is beautiful, isn't it? Oh, I haven't actually watched it yet though, so I can't commentate on the beauty of it, but it's a lovely release with a booklet. It's got the CD soundtrack. The booklet's all in German. I speak fluent German, so I can tell you that it's definitely all about Suspiria, so I can confirm that. And it's got a whole bunch of extras. It's a numbered edition. I'm not sure how many there are. I think 5,000. 4 discs. I think Suspiria is coming out in a whole bunch of releases this year. I know, is it Synapse have got it coming out? I presume someone like Arrow will pick it up in the UK, because it is overdue, a kind of all bells all bells and whistles release. But this edition, in presentation terms, is beautiful, so I think it'll be hard pressed to beat it. And I suppose what's happening is there'll be more releases of Suspiria, because there is a remake coming out. I've forgotten who's starring in it, and apparently the remake is going to avoid the kind of primary colours, the kind of operatic style of the Argento film. So in other words, completely pointless. A movie called Wild Beasts I have long loved. I'm a huge fan of Revenge of Nature movies. I'm actually working on a book about them, but that's enough about me. This is the Italian movie of the early 80s. Severin have released it in the US as a region-free Blu-ray with a whole bunch of new extras. I think it's 5 different interviews. A really insane Italian cake. That would be nice. Italian take on the nature goes amok subgenre. It's got elephants crushing heads. It's got rats chewing on faces. It's got boobies. It's got a kind of weirdly annoying kind of adolescent girl in it who is bizarre. And it just goes off in weird tangents, the usual terrible dubbing, some dubious animal cruelty that they kind of brush over in the extras, although it is approached. Rats, real rats, clearly burned alive. But otherwise, it's a bit like the 70s American TV movie. I think it's called The Beasts Are on the Streets. There's another one called The Man-Eaters Are Loose. It's like that, but on acid. So Wild Beasts, terrific Blu-ray. It's the best the movie's ever looked. I've only ever seen it on a kind of pirate version. So Wild Beasts is a recommend. There's an amazing release of Fright Night that was out the past month or so from Eureka. A really good 80s movie. I mean, I loved this as a kid. It was part of that whole 80s thing of horror movies about horror movies. There were things like The Monster Squad coming out, where the main characters were either teenagers or younger. You know, the Monster Squad was cool because the people in it were my age, just like the Goonies at the time. That's how old I am. Fright Night is one of those that I associate very much with watching horror videos in the mid to late 80s. It's fun, it's light-hearted. Watching it now, it does hold up well. I mean, it looks good on this. I wouldn't say it's a classic. I think what you realise when you rewatch Fright Night now is that it's not nearly held up as well as other horror comedies from that kind of mid-80s period, like Reanimator, Return of the Living Dead. I think those are sharper and funnier, and gorier, of course. But this is still a lot of fun. Chris Sarandon's a great vampire. Roddy McDowall is awesome in a tribute to Vincent Price, Peter Cushing. This Blu-ray, I did watch. The main extra is I think it's a 2.5-hour documentary. You're So Cool, Brewster, is the name of it. It's edited down actually from what I think was something like a 3 or 4 hour original documentary. So this release has an exclusively edited version. I think, to be honest, it doesn't need to be any longer. I feel I know all I need to know about Fright Night and all I want to know about Fright Night. But it's a great documentary. Particularly fun is a whole section on the guys that did the makeup effects. And you know what? It's no surprise, I don't think, to say that the discussion of how they accomplished these old-fashioned makeup effects is so much more entertaining than, watching a guy at a computer explaining how he made the CGI in Avatar. That's why Fangoria was so much fun in those days to read, because it's actually really fun to learn how they did this stuff from using, latex, condoms, whatever was around. Steve Johnson's really funny talking about it. The documentary ends on a kind of touching note. Tom Holland gets emotional. Director Tom Holland gets emotional as he addresses the fans straight to camera. It's a pretty touching moment. I was getting moist. I don't mind telling you that. It's been a great year of Arrow releases. So a collection that's just come out, I think 2 months ago, and is now going for a fortune from bastards on the internet who are, probably bought 5 copies and are flogging it for 4 times the original price. Fuck you! Is the House collection. My God, this is beautiful. Just a quick look. I mean, it's got a nice hardback book. We all like a nice hard one. It's got 4 movies, which is good because the House series had 4 movies. Beautiful covers, new hand drawn up. House 3, House 2. House 1, Fun House with Pat Sharp, Man About the House from the 70s, Sid James. Oh, sorry. It's a beautiful set. These movies have been given a bit of Mr. Sheen, polished up in HD. There's a documentary on each 4 movies. The House movies, in truth, are not that great. I'm a big fan, growing up I was a big fan of House 3, which is the one that's different to all the others. It's not horror comedy, it's a kind of Freddy Krueger rip-off. But it's a lot of fun. It's got Brian James way over the top as a wisecracking, meat cleaver wielding psychopath called Max Jenke. Lance Henriksen takes his shirt off and looks in good shape. He's really good as well. He's very intense in the Lance Henriksen way. House 3 is still the best one. I have quite a bit of affection for House 2, which has got a lot of kind of wacky ideas. It's got stop motion animation. It's got creatures, monsters. But in truth, the first House is pretty weak. The first House goes down a kind of embarrassing sentimental road, particularly at the end. And House 4 is absolutely awful. It's the one with the singing pizza, with the voice of Kane Hodder. And indeed the singing pizza man. I watched it and I died very slightly inside. So it's a beautiful collection, the House series box set from Arrow. It's worth picking up for nostalgia reasons, for the presentation, but do bear in mind the movies are not that great, except for House 3, which is fun. So they're now re-releasing things like Phenomena, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, as I used to say, is coming out. But Phenomena is an Argento movie I always liked. I don't think it's particularly loved, but I always thought it was a lot more fun, a lot more atmospheric, a lot more stylish than people made out. It's got a great soundtrack, you know, things like Motorhead shoehorned in, and this is a beautiful edition. I've owned it a few times before. This is a new restoration in 4K. There's 3 different versions, even the censored 83-minute travesty that was released in Britain as Creepers. I don't know why you'd want to rewatch that. Here's the movie with 30 minutes cut out so it makes even less sense and the gore removed. But it's there. It's also got a 2-hour documentary which is brand new, a new commentary by the very excellent Troy Howarth, who's doing a lot of these things now. The presentation is grand. The longest version I think is just under 2 hours of the movie itself. It's also got the soundtrack, which is such a wonderful soundtrack by Claudio Simonetti and also Simon Boswell. You know, big players in this kind of stuff in the 80s. And I just love the soundtrack. I love the whole movie. It's got everything you could want. It's got Jennifer Connelly. Oh, sorry. It's got Donald Pleasance. Oh, and it's got a bunch of flies that they communicate with. Phenomena. Great movie. Buy it. The most extraordinary thing that Arrow have released of late is this, which is a box. Very fantastic. They're really branching out. Oh, it's a box of stuff actually. It's I'll show you that side. It may make more sense. It's the Pieces box. Pieces has come out with a few pieces. Different editions. I mean, the edition you can buy in a regular fashion by itself pretty much is, you know, grand just on its own, which is the I think it's a 3-disc edition. I may be wrong. It's got the CD soundtrack again, you know, nice touch, really fun soundtrack. It's got a whole bunch of new extras, plus all the extras from the very good Grindhouse release they did in America, which was region free and still out there. Love the cover work on this though. I think it's better than the cover they did for the US version. It's got a booklet, as you'd expect with Arrow. It's also got a jigsaw, and as you'll see if I hold this up, it's a jigsaw of a naked lady with a bush out. So I think if you're a fan of naked jigsaws, this is probably the best release of Pieces you'll see this year. Pieces is an amazing movie. Pieces is just superb. Pieces is one of the best slasher movies of the 80s. It's so much fun, you know, it's comically just absurd. It's the movie in which Lynda Day George, star of Grizzly, just loses it. She's a tennis playing tennis player, and she loses it at one point in a very intense moment. She yells, "Bastard! Bastard!" about 300 times into thin air at no one in particular, just because she's irate. And it's got an outrageous ending. You know, it's got a chop socky interlude. It's got a randomly positioned kung fu guy that turns up because he had some bad chop suey, and it's pieces. It's just one of the most fun things you could watch. The edition also in this version comes with a wonderful new vinyl release of the soundtrack on blood red vinyl, but hasn't turned up yet. So I think people are bitching and moaning on the internet that, where's my vinyl? There's a delay, I guess, manufacturing. I can wait. You know, I've lived 39 years without it, and I feel I can manage a couple of months without it. But when it turns up, I'll be pleased. But I can wait. I can wait. Oh.